We're joined by Professor Henry Chesbrough. Henry is a professor, as I mentioned before, at both ESADE in Barcelona and at Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, where he is at the moment. Henry is the fellow who coined the term open innovation, and he has often been referred to as the father of it, but that makes him seem very old. So, Henry, I shall refrain from that. Okay. Ultimately, Henry has, as you see in your packs, he has presented a new paper, which is the title of this conference, From Open Science to Open Innovation. Henry this is a bit of a framework, a new way that we can try to think about this problem of how to get from research infrastructure to economic value. So, Henry, are you still with us?
I am indeed.
Okay. Well, why don't you proceed? Yes? Okay.
Yes, I'll proceed.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I had a chance to listen in on the previous panel's conversation and really enjoyed the discussion around the tension perhaps between scientific integrity and creating useful results out of scientific research. In the paper that I've prepared that's in your hands, this is not a new concern. This goes back more than a century in terms of managing science. And indeed, the American Academy for the Advancement of Science in the late 19th century, the head of it was a man named Henry Rollins, who considered over too much concern with the application of science to be, and these are his words, prostituted science. And he considered people like Edison to be third-rate at best in terms of their scientific quality. By contrast, if you look at the president of Stanford University today, a man named John Hennessy, he is a well-known computer scientist who has taken 3 different leaves of absence during the course of his academic career and has started up 3 different startup companies. And he sits on the board of Cisco and Google even to this day. And I don't think many people would consider Stanford to be a schlock science outfit. And so this tension in the previous panel around integrity and excellence has been very favorably resolved at institutions like Stanford. We would like to think that we're doing it as well at Berkeley and MIT and other places in the US. So I strongly support the panel's observation that this is actually something that should not get in the way of excellent science and can frustrate effective innovation if taken too far. So that's in your packet. And let me, if I may, just outline some of the
Go ahead.
Arguments in the paper. And then Sergio is actually going to kind of follow me up in person, and we'll be kind of a 1-2 punch for how to create what we hope will be some institutions to support effective innovation, building on some excellent science. So if you look at the CERN initiative, I think we can all agree it's a magnificent achievement scientifically that has involved tens of thousands of collaborators and contributors from all over the world. If my memory serves, I think there were either 4,000 or 6,000 names on the paper that the Nobel Committee picked for awarding the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the Higgs boson.
6,000.
6, thank you.
Sergio acknowledges. You've met them all, have you, Sergio? Yeah. Okay.
And I think this scale of collaboration is quite impressive. And the institution at CERN really developed some excellent norms around open science, where the researchers involved consciously eschew any ownership over what they find in return for recognition. if they do find something, and the glory and recognition that comes from being part of the discovery is part of the incentive system, if you will, in open science. And this is very powerful, very effective for extensive collaboration, and is also quite consistent with the comments around distributed centers for this later on, because we're going to need to keep that flow of knowledge moving quite strongly. At the same time, it has to be said that having strong science does not by itself guarantee effective commercialization of the results of the science. And this paradox is actually what motivated my original book, Open Innovation, where I'm looking at how is it that institutions like Xerox PARC created some wonderful technologies, but the benefits of that did not flow to the company that paid for it, Xerox, but instead flowed to others who subsequently engaged and perhaps more effectively commercialized some of the discoveries that came out of the lab. And the reason that this is a problem is that the best commercial use of a new discovery is often far from obvious. To go to CERN, it isn't at all clear, I think, to many people how the discovery of the Higgs boson is going to create commercial opportunity. It's very ambiguous, it's highly complex and uncertain, and it often involves investment not just for the supplier of the technology, but the early customers of the technology often have to make investments as well to apply this effectively. So there's a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity that has to be managed. An older example that I think illustrates how far it can end up from the original science, if you go back to the industrial laser, we built those in the 1950s and 1960s with our understanding of the physics of light. But it wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that we found the real commercial applications for this discovery, and they turned out to be CD players and DVD players, which are quite far from the intentions and understandings of the scientists that did the pioneering research work. So, in addition to excellent science and deeper knowledge, there's going to be a need for risk taking, for entrepreneurship, and in many cases, for some capital investment to support the application of these discoveries. And this kind of work is generally not as prestigious as quote unquote real science, and yet for effective innovation, it's crucial. And so the institutions of open science at some point have to give way to what we might think of as institutions for the application of that science or open innovation. And one mechanism that's obviously different is the funding mechanism. The funding mechanisms for open science generally come from the public sector, to some extent from the philanthropic sector. Very little of this funding comes from the commercial sector. When you move to the innovation realm, however, the situation is flipped. The public sector can provide underlying infrastructure and support, but the lead has to come from commercial institutions, not public institutions. This also means there's going to need to be some assignment of some amount of ownership or IP rights in particular applications or domains that draw from an underlying body of open science. And we have to be careful not to contaminate the underlying commons of knowledge. But at the same time, if we're going to enable people to take these risks, apply this capital, and explore these ambiguous, uncertain areas, there has to be some level of ownership for this to take place. I would also note in the previous panel the discussion around the individual incentives of researchers and scientists, that if they are absolutely prohibited from engaging with people in industry, that's a pretty effective way to make sure you won't get effective application of the science. And instead, you need to craft arrangements where some forms of engagement are supported or even encouraged, while at the same time respecting that they have different roles to play in the process. So at UC Berkeley, I am allowed to spend up to 20% of my time, or 1 day a week, working on what are called outside activities. So research, teaching, writing, these are the activities of 80% of my time as a professor, but I can spend up to 20% visiting a company, advising a project, and getting some form even of compensation, whether that be some form of advisory fee or in some cases even some stock option from a young startup company, most of which will never be worth anything, but it gives an incentive to the researcher to not only be a professor, but to take on and think about the context of a young company trying to apply this science. And so there's going to need to be some mechanisms like this, that if you're going to move knowledge from the science base to the application, you've got to have ways of moving people and in getting people to engage to do that. And I think this is where we come to the proposal that Sergio is going to talk about around Attract, where it's a proposal that builds on a very broad public commons of knowledge generated from the activities at CERN, but is also going to try to provide some of these institutional arrangements to encourage risk-taking and exploration in the application of that science to create some effective innovation outcomes. And so with that, I can either take questions or turn it over to Sergio, Richard, whichever you would prefer.
I think at the moment, why don't we hear from Sergio, and then we'll come back to you, Henry, okay? All right?
Very, very good.
Okay, thank you very much, Henry. Sergio, first of all, let me introduce you. Sergio Bertolucci, he's the Director for Research and Scientific Computing at CERN. He, with several colleagues at other research infrastructure across Europe, and ESADE and ALTO, who are also represented here, have been working on a new idea. So, Sergio.
Yeah, thank you very much. Henry has said most of it already. And our reflection started from a very simple thing, simple observation. Europe, since we are not the United States of Europe yet, or maybe never, it has a very peculiar thing. It has hundreds of research infrastructure, which are at a level, some of them are a European level, some of them are even global, like CERN. But each nation has a wealth of places where there is competencies, instruments, and things like that. It's clear that this could be a multiplier for innovation, and it's a multiplier that will not stay there forever, because these research infrastructure are constantly challenged by the people. Say, well, now we are making the next neutron facility. Why you keep it your thing open? Just close it. We all go to the next one. And this will be a disaster, because will let disappear all the competencies and all the local access to instruments. So research infrastructure are a very powerful back end through their instruments, are a very powerful front end with their people. But they're using Europe now probably at the percent level in this sense in creating innovation. And research infrastructure are good, and science, fundamental science. I am one of the people who I am an experimental physicist. So I have difficulty just to think that you can do good science if you don't understand the application of science. I never had in my life the division between fundamental science and applied science. There is only the application of good science. There is good science or bad science, that's all. And with different responsibilities as a scientist, as a citizen. But at the end, we are a community. If you look at that, just following it bottom up, the scientific community has developed this concept in which we can be in an environment which stays open, because we can, in that environment, collaborate and compete at the same time. It is very important. because this is the name of the game. Nobody wants just to publish second the Higgs discovery. But you cannot do the Higgs discovery if you don't have 3,000 PhD students and 6,000 people working for 15 years just to make Atlas and CMS. So, but by doing this thing, we connect very well with industry. Because nobody in this world, so it's a long time in which we believe that the Vannevar-Bush linear model, no, from academia to market is true. Now, nobody has all the questions, nobody has all the answers. So we need just to work in an environment in which we share our answers, our questions, and we are a fantastic place where we train people just to work together, to take risk, and just to get appetite for risk, for curiosity. Because we are training thousands of people every year in the research infrastructure in Europe. And this is the main transmitter and value that we give it. And then we connect through many ways. We connect with inventors, because you have always in this environment the people who think out of the box, with investors that sometimes they see distant things. And then we even learn, because we have just to learn it. You don't do a thing like LHC by simply just a piece of paper and just a piece of scotch tape. And so we need just to learn how just to manage at the business level this thing. And then by doing that, we have an immediate give back and connection with the society through many things. There have been many examples. But at the end, we are good in doing that if we are retaining our main mission, which is doing well our job. Well, it's clear that we need just to be open, and being open in an environment like in the European research infrastructure of the Euro is a normal thing. At CERN in this moment there are more than 100 nationalities working together. We have Iranian working with US American, Israeli working with Palestinian, Pakistani working with Indians, Italians working with other Italians, which is a miracle. and it's fantastic. And all there, what is pushing the thing is that essentially there we are not interested in the incremental thing. We are not even interested in the apparently impossible. We are interested in the unthinkable. And this is the name of the game. We want just really just to push the envelope. Yeah, next thing, after the Higgs, we will not have the syndrome, the PhD syndrome. You know, PhD syndrome is post-Higgs depression. We know a lot. We have a lot of fantasy after the Higgs, and we are restarting doing now. And all the fields in fundamental research are like that. They have really an appetite for risk because it's connected to our being human. So we are human, we are curious. So this is a way in which we change the unthinkable in things that is tomorrow or today's snapshot. This is the way in which, with these beautiful things like free electron lasers, we will take picture of things that only when I was studying, people would say, well, you cannot look at atoms, come on. So atoms moving and moving around. But we need just to develop a technology which is capable of having a sharp detector at the femtosecond level. So we are not quite there. We are getting there. While we are building this instrument, and these instruments are fundamental because we understood that genomics is not all the story. We have just to go at least a couple of levels deeper than that. So proteomics will be the next thing. We have just to understand why, after all, our genome is not so different from the mosquito one. So there is a longer story. No? Probably will be told about that. So what we are trying just to do with this thing, and again, is a thing which is not a CERN. I would like just to stress it. Is not a CERN initiative. It's an initiative that it's a failure if it is not an initiative which is of all the research infrastructure. We are starting with the visible one, the AROS, which are essentially representing Europe across all the type of science. What we think we should do is just to create a governance. This governance which will essentially administer competitive calls, but will ensure three things. We are not doing innovation at 4 pi. We have decided just to choose one simple argument. Development of sensors, of the associated electronics, of the system just to read them out in the ICT, and the way in which you elaborate the data. Sensors are a key enabling technology for many things, across all the sciences, and across many of the societal challenges nowadays. So this is our concentration. We want just that all the projects which will go through and be elected through that are done at the beginning, from the start, as co-development between industry and research infrastructure. We want to follow this project through their growth and measure their impact. And we want at the end create an environment, an ecosystem, in which people get more and more a sort of a beautiful market where you can find ideas, you can bring ideas, you leave ideas, you take ideas, you don't reinvent the wheel many times over, while when you're getting closer to the market, protecting the IP and the right of everybody. So is challenging. We are willing just to, we are discussing now with the Commission the way in which we could start just to make a demonstrator. We are discussing technically. I think that if the demonstrator demonstrates, we are experimental physicists after all, that I think that could be a very powerful idea just to foster innovation across Europe, create value, create jobs, create future. Thank you.
Let me make sure I understand this. So this is an initiative to spin technologies out of the laboratories that you just mentioned and into the market.
Well, it is a bit more, Richard. I think it is a way in which we spin what we have just to spin, and together we develop some breakthrough thing. We use the brains and the ideas which are coming out, which are alpha ideas, maybe sometime in the industry, sometime in the research, and we go one step beyond.
Okay. And what stage are you in development of this idea?
Well, we are discussing with the Commission about a demonstrator, a prototype, which is not too small, which is not too big. And we are setting up a structure, a governance for that, because we would like that this be governed by the representation of the research infrastructure, by a representative of the industry, under the supervision of or the auditing of the Commission. And this body, the governing body, will have a scientific body which will do exactly what we are doing by judging the thing.
And the technologies we're talking about then are detectors you mentioned.
Sensors.
So these are the cameras that you've got to CERN, or that they got at synchrotrons.
Is the thing that we are using, we wear sensors already, number of sensors with us every day. In a couple of years, will be probably a few human cells with a lot of sensors around. And is one of the key enabling technology, which is pervasive, which goes from frontier science, the femtosecond or the attosecond detectors, to the automotive, to the smart cities.
And then there's also software too.
And software and the way in which you elaborate the information coming from that.
So Henry, are you still with us?
Yeah.
Yes?
I am still with
good.
you.
Okay. By the way, I should explain to the audience, which I just discovered as I went back there. If you were watching online, you'd be seeing Henry right now. So, Henry, unfortunately, here the audience can't see you, but they can hear you, whereas online they both hear and see you. So, those of you here, sorry, you're tough luck. I mean, have an extra drink at the end of the day, okay? Thank you very much. But Henry, could I ask you a question? That you're talking about your new institutions for open innovation. How do you get private capital to be interested in any of this stuff? How do you, I mean, how do you actually make it happen with private capital?
So private capital is going to need to see a prospect of a return on their investment. So you need to give them some hope that something might come out of this that could be quite valuable. But there's lots of risk involved. And at the same time, one mustn't give them too much. So you don't want to give them the rights to everything coming out of the knowledge, out of the research going on at an institution like CERN. But in some particular application area, some particular approach, what we sometimes refer to as foreground work, as a new project is being initiated to explore the application, let's say, of those detectors that Sergio was talking about, in the application for imaging for medical science, you might want to give some limited IP protection for a particular avenue of exploration to do that. So you keep the commons open, but you allow foreground work that applies it to be conducted with private capital, and should they find something useful within that application, they enjoy some property rights to commercialize that and invest the capital, while others can be exploring other uses in different domains, again, with getting some limited protection for their particular use as well.
Okay. Sergio, what kind of companies are you looking for?
Well, we are looking for a company who have an appetite for leading-edge technologies, which have an appetite for a future, so high-tech, small and medium enterprise, electronics, sensor, IT. So it is a rich market.
And what kind of, what about venture capital firms?
Well, venture capital is also there. I mean, what we would like just to create is a nice place where people are coming in, get an appetite. And venture capital, if we make a McDonald's, probably they will not get very much appetite unless they're very hungry. If we make a three-star restaurant, probably they will come in and say, wow, there is a lot of offering around here.
Okay.
And we have some schemes. Just to
and
make it,
physically, the payback from this would be what? So we get spin-out companies, hopefully, get products, services?
Yes, services, jobs, and unpredictable follow-up of anything you develop. So we started some time ago in a small thing that we have started at CERN, which is called Idea Square, a development of a small thing, augmented reality for doing the maintenance of one of these experiments. This augmented reality now, this software and design is used to teach autistic kids to write. We had no ideas that it was going there. And now we are developing other things together with Areva, just to use use this thing of this augmented reality, just to have a radiation sensor, which not only will measure the integral of the radiation, but will tell you, don't put your hand there, because it's hot, because you have a small gamma camera there. So this thing is branching off in places where, when we started, we had no idea that was going there. Okay. So we would like just to put in motion in Europe this thing, which is, there is an enormous potential. There are so many smart young people in Europe, and even not young, smart people, who essentially, the environment in Europe has lost the appetite for this thing. And we would like just to contribute to that.
Okay, all right. So let me stop it there for a moment, and let's continue this discussion with another panel. Okay, right. So Henry, thank you very much for joining us.
Bye, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.